So we've talked through the setup for 3D modeling a character. We've talked through the subdivision surface modifier, which was used very frequently. But let's actually take a few steps forward and let's just walk through the process quickly of, say, making that character lax from Dumb Ways to Die. So I'm going to add that image reference back. I'm going to go to my 3D modeling folder. I'm going to add lax as a reference image. I'm going to go to my filters and make sure selections are an option. I'm going to lock lax as a tracing image. I'm going into object mode, into the image mode, and I'm going to add opacity and turn the opacity of lax way down. And I'm going to be working with the last cube that we turned into a sphere from our last lesson. If you need a refresher on this, I can do it in just a few quick moments. We go to Add Mesh Cube, and we go to the Modifiers tab, or we simply press Control 1. We apply that modifier, and then we do it again. We go to the object and Control 1, and then with that object selected, I go to Shade Smooth, and that got us what we wanted. I'm using 2 levels on my viewport and 2 on my render, so very quick to get that back had you lost it. I was in the textured view, so that's why I had a nice real soft light on my object. And from here, I can just go through the process of building out my character. Now, I've only got one render view of lax. If I had a side view, that would be helpful. But for now, I'm going to do a lot in my front orthographic and perhaps my user perspective. All right, well, let's get into it. Tab key, select your object rather, and then Tab key to get into that mode. And then I'm going to, just for purposes of clarity of this video, I'm going to get out of my quad view. You may want to work completely in that view. And then I'm going to click on the 1 key to get into my front orthographic, just because that's the view that I'm really focused on right now. But for convenience, you can keep in your 4 views if you like. I am now just going to start the process. Let's go to, I think I like my wireframe view here, and let's turn X-ray on. Let's see, hold on. I want to get just a little bit of a view there. That should work. All right, and now I can go through the process of grabbing points and just moving them into space so that now I can start to get that shape of my lax character. And this is a combination of moving, pushing, pulling, scaling, adjusting, and let's see, let's go into our perspective, even extruding. So I'm going to grab a few faces here. So I'm going to grab these 4 top faces and go back into my home view. And I'm going to do a quick extrusion up. Oops. Let's do this up. And we're going to do a scale in and just kind of narrow that shape. One more extrusion up. And probably another scale to narrow that shape. Going into my 3D view. And we've got kind of like a comical bend on this shape, which is fine. It looks pretty good. Let's go back into my rendered view. And he's coming along decently fine. Next thing on lax, he's got these real noodly-like arms. And these noodle arms, I think most instinct is to dig out that cylinder shape because, goodness, the cylinder shape, we haven't gotten to use it much at all, and wouldn't it be great if adding a cylinder, we could finally use that cylinder shape versus using cubes for everything. But I want to show you what happens if we use the cylinder and we try to put a subdivision modifier on this cylinder. So I'm just going to hide the rest of these shapes. Oops, not the whole collection, please. But I'm going to get rid of this other stuff just so I can see nothing but the cylinder. And I'm going to go into just my perspective view, just again so you can have a little bit better view on it for the video. I'm in object mode, so I'm going to Control 1 And goodness gracious, when I put on the subdivision surface, the result is not particularly attractive, at least not with the Catmull-Clark method of subdivision. Putting a simple on it does do it a little bit better-ish, but to be honest, I don't even really see what it's doing. And that's because with the simple subdivision surface, it's not doing that calculation between the top and the side, whereas Catmull-Clark, that usually makes more of a smoother shape, is doing that. So what do we do here? How do we get noodle arms if this makes such a ghastly mess of the 3D model and shape? And you may already know the answer. The answer is that we go back 2 cubes. Let's get rid of this cylinder. Delete the cylinder. I'm going to turn on the rest of these shapes just so I know where my stuff is. Back into the quad view, and I'm going to add a new cube. I'm going to put it over here on the side. I'm going to hit Control 1 to turn it into a cube. Turn the cube into a sphere. I'm going to apply it, and then I'm going to do it again. And that is going to reveal to me, let's get a wireframe view if you would please, this kind of shape here. Now this shape has, if you notice, a real smooth edge to it, or kind of, we'll call it the caps. Let me get into edit mode, and I'm going to pull out a few of these. Let me go points here, and let me go in we're in wireframe just so I pull those out. So I'm going to pull a few of these out just to show, once I stretch this out, that the ends are kind of have a rounded shape to them. Now, this isn't quite a noodle arm yet, is it? Let's go ahead and into object mode. Let's thin this guy down a little bit. Oops. So I'll go into my scale, and I'm just going to thin this thing down in my top view, so that way it's very, very, very thin. But we're getting kind of this like odd, like well, it's not rounded at the tip, right? It's got this really extreme curve to it. I don't really like that. So we could use the knife control. We could do a few other things, but what I prefer to do is get out the get into edit mode and get into the loop cut tool. So I've got loop cut here, and I can, let me get some stuff deselected here. Let go of my points if you would please. Let go of those. The loop cut, and I can just start putting some loop cuts in there. And as I do this, and then let's see, I don't know why my levels are down, but as I put some loop cuts in there on this object, you can see how it smoothed that out quite a bit, which is nice to see. So using a cube can really get you a disc or noodle-like shape for arms and other things of that sort. Back into edit mode a little bit. I'm going to grab a few of these points, and I just want to stretch these guys. Let's go here. Let's go there. I want to stretch some of these guys towards the end. And in fact, I'm going to kind of cheat this a little bit as I squash this down, and I move all that point density towards the end. It is going to soften that end quite a bit and turn it into a much nicer kind of noodle arm. All right, let's get out of it and go back in object. There you go, much better. Scale this guy down one more time, and then I'm going to get it just so that it's, let's move it over. We're not going to do that just yet. Move it over and just get a sense for its scale against the reference. So that looks like it's probably as thin as it needs to be. Yeah, pretty good. So we'll maybe plug that guy in there, rotate, and position it against the reference image. Pretty good. And then in edit mode, I can take these points and just do like a soft bend on them. I may need some extra geometry here that I don't have, but just like a soft bend, back in object mode. And you can see it's getting the look and feel of that of that arm. So almost there. Edit. Let's move a few more points. Let's get these points right there. Let's get these points up there. A little bit more of a harsher bend on the root lattice, but the resulting subdivided version is looking pretty good. Back in object mode, and not bad. May have a few points that got torn there just because I was in wireframe. But I'm showing you that step to show that getting objects built from cubes is really important when you're working with characters, because it keeps all of your polygons in quad form, meaning it's got 4 vertices that make up a face. Otherwise, if you have what are called n-gons, or polygons that have more than 4 sides, that is where you get that nasty looking disc shape that we saw earlier when trying to apply subdivision surfaces. Just a few more things that I want to show, and then we'll move on to the next video. Let's go back into a shaded view. You can, in edit mode, grab a collection of polygons, and as you saw I did extrusions earlier, you can do a collection of insets and other things like that in order to get some kind of different effects on your character. So for example, if we wanted to kind of force in like a mouth shape, I know this character doesn't really have like an inset mouth, but if we did, we could do something like an inset here, right? And then maybe something like an extrusion in the shape, and then maybe another extrusion in the shape. We're going back behind that guy. And then if I do this right, I can grab, oops, I don't want the extrusion. I could grab these edges that are kind of around, like, we'll call it kind of the mouth and lips of my character. Scale these down. And we've kind of created a concave mouth shape just with a few kind of a few insets there and extrusions. So that's another thing that I wanted to show, is just grabbing these faces and using insets and extrusions. Give yourself some geometry space to do that, and that'll keep these edges looking really smooth. Otherwise, if you just take a face and you do like an extrusion in, it can create some kind of nastiness. So I guess a thing to keep in mind is, you know, when you're trying to do, like, say, an extrusion here, an inset, do your inset and then do your extrusion, but do it with a couple of steps. That way you get this kind of like smoother flow versus trying to go to your harsh extremes. So there you are.